topic is the Stop the Lockouts and Raise Our Pay campaign, right? I know we have other things to talk about, but right now we're going to focus on this campaign. Okay? All right. So, first of all, I just want to make sure we all understand what is utilization rate, because there's a lot of confusing information that, Uber and company are telling the drivers. So, let me remind everybody. The TLC has the rule on how much Uber and Lyft must pay the drivers for every trip, per mile and per minute. And those amounts are divided by what is called utilization, which is the percentage. Is the percentage of time that you are busy with the fare. So if the utilization is 58%, that means 42% of the time you are empty. Okay? And so Uber and Lyft, when they pay you on the trip, they have to make up for your empty time. New York City and I think Seattle, there's only like 2 cities in the whole country where the drivers have this protection. Let me give you an example. You heard the news in Massachusetts, yes, right? I think it's something like $32 an hour. Oh yeah, okay, let's do $32.50 an hour. Okay, but here is the catch. $32.50 an hour, but your time with the passenger. So if the driver in that city is only busy 50% of the time, their actual pay is $16.25 for the hour. You see what I mean? In New York, it's different. Okay? In New York, right now, so first of all, in 2019, is when the TLC first set the rates. They did a study, they saw 58, they looked at driver expenses, they looked at how many fares drivers get, and they looked at how busy you are. Based on that, they came up with the rates. Just so you know, our union, so Lyft sued to stop it, and the judge dismissed Lyft's case. And the judge even said in the case that the Taxi Workers Alliance provided the evidence for all the expenses. That's why the TLC had to raise the rates. And so those rates were set in 2019. And the rule says every year the city must look at cost of living. If cost of living goes up, the rates must go up. Now, in 2022, inflation was very high. That's why we were fighting for the raise at that time. And we said, so for the per minute rate, the formula is to give you enough money for like take home pay. Per mile is to help you cover expenses. So at that time, we said for the per mile, the city must look at inflation for transportation. And because transportation costs were, I think, like more than 25% higher compared to cost of living, which is like bread and milk, right? So we won, right? We won that in 2023. So it's okay, Gabe is translating.
Yeah, if you hear me talking, guys, it's because I'm translating in Spanish. Don't worry, I'm not being rude.
So what happened is, these rates, they go up by cost of living every year. But like, for example, in 2024, it was 3.5% increase. It's not very high, right, normally. Okay, second issue is when cost, if you only get the raise based on cost of living, that's not a real raise. That just means if it cost you $5 to, if it cost you like $5 to you know, to buy something, right? And today it costs you, you know, $5.50. And if they raise your pay so you earn $5.50, you didn't save anything. It's just the value of your money is equalized to keep you at, so your whatever the rate was in 2019, it's a cost of living increase keeps the value of your pay at that level, right? Okay. But because the other thing TLC must review every year right now is utilization. So every year they look at the percentage of time that you're busy, the percentage of time that you're empty, right? And so there's also seats back there.
Yeah, we have a couple seats over here, guys.
2 or 3. So if the TLC also has to look at utilization percentage, right? That is the other way that your value is kept up. And it is the other way that we have a door opening to get an increase for the drivers. You see what I mean? So that's why, so utilization is really important, number one, because that's how you make up for empty time. Oh, I think, any more agendas? Maybe we ran out? Oh. Can you
There's a couple here.
Oh. So number one is how we make sure drivers are paid for your empty time, right? And number two, it's how we get the TLC to look at the rates every year. You see what I mean? So in other cities, like even in upstate, right? It's like, oh, they're getting so much more per hour. Remember, everywhere else it's only your engaged time. Only like New York City and I think Seattle looks also at your empty time. So what happened is in 2023, remember in 2022, Uber sued to stop the increase. You guys remember that in December? We did the strike in December 2022. In January, February, we did the strikes. Uber won the lawsuit because of the way the TLC, it's just technical. We told the TLC to not do it that way. They didn't listen. The way they did it, they thought they were gonna get more for the drivers. But, you know, Uber was able to sue a technical point, and they won that lawsuit. But because of our strikes, Uber agreed to not sue again, right? And then TLC redid the rule. So here's very, very important thing, okay? When the TLC did the rule again in 2023, they made a very important change. They said in the pay rule formula, they will fix the utilization rate at 58%. Even if in reality you go down to 53%, in the formula it will stay 58%. What that meant, so if you guys look at the paper here, you see the difference. If in reality, Brother, we're getting, do you have more copies there?
No, I don't have copies.
Okay, Brother, we'll get more copies. Gabe, can you make more copies?
Sure.
I'm sorry. So, if you want to share for now, you can look with.
Hey guys, could we get 3 or 4 people to come to the seats over here? So more people are gonna come. We have some seats in the back.
Yeah,
You
there's
could just
some
come in the back.
Michael, you guys can make room because people are gonna enter there. Yeah. Yeah, you can also go up here, that's fine. Okay, so when you look at the paper, right, look at the difference. When, this is a typical fare example, right? Typical fare of 2.5 miles and 25 minutes trip, okay? Let's say when the utilization is 58%, you're going to get $17.98 for the trip, which is right now. If the utilization in reality is actually 53%, and Uber and Lyft had to pay you at the 53% rate, for that trip you get $1.69 more. Now, typically for a full-time driver of, let's say, 11 trips a day, 6 days a week, 44 weeks of the year. Those are like the averages, right? At the end of the year, it's $4,907 you're losing out. Now, one more example. Right now, the actual utilization is 51%. If the TLC rule required they have to pay you at the actual rate, you would take home $7,000 more a year. $7,143. This, brothers and sisters, is what the fight is about. This is the fight. This is what they don't want to pay you. Do you see the difference?
It's a big difference.
It's a big difference. I mean, 7,000 a year.
100,000 drivers, you can calculate minimum.
Exactly.
It's a lot of money.
Exactly. Now, I want to look at one more thing. So, by the way, one reason we're meeting in person. So first of all, you were the members we called because you guys have been amazing. You come to all the actions. You've been active in the field. You come to the Zooms. You pay attention. You bring other friends with you. You are the reason that our campaign has been strong. You are the reason. So, brothers and sisters, this meeting is very important that all of us understand this fully. So if anybody has a question, please just raise your hand. It's good. Maybe 5 other people have same question in your mind. So there's no bad question. Okay? But I want to make sure everybody understands these numbers. So again, in 2023, TLC changed the rule that the utilization rate would be fixed at 58%, even if the actual utilization came down to 53%. So during this time, drivers are already losing $4,900. Yes, Michael?
Oh, okay. Well, what I'm looking over here is they said, the TLC said 58%, as you just mentioned.
Yeah.
But actually, they went down, so they're not honoring what they were saying.
That's right.
So why they went down to 53 to 51 instead of capping it at 58, like they were going to do?
So what happened was, so TLC, so Uber last year, Uber at the TLC hearing in last March 2023 said, if you make the utilization like 58%, 56% is too high, we cannot meet it. And if you do that, basically they implied they will lock out the drivers. And then Uber said, oh, but if it's like 52%, that's low enough, we can meet that. So meaning they would not lock out the drivers. So this was the compromise. Uber got the rule that the rate will stay 58%, even if in reality they go down to 53%, but they don't have to pay the drivers more, right? And in exchange, Uber implied they would not do lockouts, right? If I have if I have a minute, I can even I'm sorry, give me 1 minute. Let me see if I can find, I have like the quotes and everything also from Uber. Want me to read it to you?
Yes.
All right, okay, this was at the hearing. Okay, this is Josh Gold. This is the Uber lobbyist. By the way, that Uber lobbyist confronted Mr. Mohammed.
Yeah, I remember him.
At the last hearing, when Mr. Mohammed confronted them with the truth, and he got up. Okay, and IDG defended the guy. Okay, this is what he said. He said, now, coming back with 56% rather than 52% as the floor, you are forcing companies to make a decision to lock out. Right? He's talking to TLC, right? Normally, it had stayed above that. But now that we are moving to an industry-wide standard, so he's saying normally for Uber, we stayed above even 56%, you know, in like 2021, 2022. He said, but now that we are moving to an industry-wide standard, we don't know if the free rider, which is Lyft, if the other company with smaller market share is going to also care about their utilization. And so when we have to think about our rate, we have to limit the amount of time people are on the app, and in order to get and stay above 56%. So just a pause, right? So he's saying, we Uber, we can stay at 56%, but Lyft cannot. And because the Lyft utilization and the Uber utilization is combined for the average, he's saying the industry rate will come down. So if they turn on the other company's app, so when we have to think about our utilization, we have to limit the amount of time people are on the app, and in order to get and stay above 56%. If they turn on the other company's app, meaning drivers, if drivers turn on Lyft's app, that brings the industry down, and so we are concerned that we will go below 56%. And then he said, we have no concerns about 52%. So TLC negotiated, and they made the bottom 53%. That's why they changed that rule. But you can hear in his comment, right? He's basically saying, if you do this change, we don't have to do lockouts. Right? Okay. He lied, and let's talk about how the lie happened. So, that was in March 2023. And then what happened? Right after that hearing, TLC started releasing plates. First, it was the 2,500 SHL plates, pilot plates, and Uber and Lyft said, we're not going to dispatch to those cars, right? And then they did the 1,000 EV plates, remember?
Yes.
And then first they said, oh, we're only going to do the 1,000, that's it. And then last summer, they came out with the Green Trips rule. In the Green Trips initial rule, by 2030, Uber and Lyft, more and more of their trips can be dispatched only to EVs and Waves. By 2030, all 100% of their trips must be to EV or Wave, right? Yes.
So, the first question is that when we say that if drivers turn to Lyft to bring the industry rate down, so, because what they're defending there, what they're trying to protect.
No, so what they're saying is, because Uber has 75% of the trips, Lyft has only 25%. And after COVID, in 2022, only 85% of total trips came back, 15% of passengers still didn't even come back. So trips altogether were down, one. And number two, Lyft trips were really down. So what Uber is saying is, look, that Lyft keeps hiring more drivers even though they don't have the work. And so their utilization keeps coming down, and that's also bringing down Uber's utilization. That was their.
That's the part I don't understand.
Because the industry-wide because when TLC uses 58%, they don't look at Uber or Lyft, they look at both of them. They do the average for both combined. So because, let's say for example, mathematically, if Uber is at 56%, but if Lyft, for example, is at like 53%, right? Then the average industry is going to be at like 54.5%, right?
And
Yeah, they're trying to turn it on. Yeah.
And our argument with Uber for us to get a better pay, to be able to manage our expenses and all of that, is not even in regard of the whole industry. Because Uber came with its model of transportation to disrupt the whole taxi industry. So if we look, the negotiations you guys did to get us all this privilege in terms of rate, like utilization rate and all of that is fine. At the very beginning, Uber was just charging passenger anyhow they want. And even if they didn't have the amount of drivers that they needed to carry out their mission, and they was offering to drivers to come and work with them, and if you couldn't make $7,000 in a week, they will give you the difference. So it's a trick, because they kind of fool us to come to their platform.
Let's not overcomplicate it. I understand what you're saying. We can talk about how the rules came in, but let's not overcomplicate, because this is complicated enough. I really want people to understand what's happening right now. Because let me take 1 second. The reason I really want everybody to understand what's happening right now is because you also need to understand what Uber and Uber's agents are trying to attack right now, right? So that's why I want to make sure this rule is really properly understood. The idea that Lyft being low is a fact. The idea that Lyft's utilization brings down the industry-wide utilization, that's also a fact. Uber's not saying anything wrong by saying that. But, 1 second, Nicole. But what started to happen is, okay, just to jump forward, what started to happen is after all the plates came in, Uber's utilization started to come down. So, Uber is worried about not reaching 53%. Forget 58. They're not trying for 58. They're only trying to reach 53%, the minimum. As long as Uber and Lyft are at 53%, they don't have to pay you more. That's the bare, it means you were empty 47% of the time, but they can still pay you like you were empty only 42% of the time, because that's how the rule was changed. Everybody follow that? Okay. So, yes, sister.
Pamela, so I do follow you the way you explain it, but I'm trying to figure out, like, you said Uber and Lyft, right?
Yeah.
So if this is a rule that was when the TLC told them about the utilization rate, why is it they can get away with it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, the thing is that, here's what's happening right now. TLC reviews the utilization rate once a year.
Right.
So the next review will actually be next year. So Uber is locking drivers out right now because they believe that at the end of 2024, their average utilization will be less than 53%. And so next year, in January 2025, they don't want TLC to raise the rates. You see what I mean? So that's what Uber is after. Okay, that's one thing. That's one thing. But the second thing Uber is after, Uber is squeezing the drivers So drivers can say, whatever you do TLC, stop the lockouts. So if TLC goes to Uber and Uber says, okay, we'll stop the lockouts if you bring utilization rate to 50%, right? It means drivers will look at 53%, you lose $7,000. If it, I'm sorry, 51%, you lose $7,000, right? But so that's what they are hoping to negotiate with TLC. Right now, the floor is 53%. But if they can lower it to, let's say, 51 or 50, you lose more money. That's what their game is right now. Okay, Michael, and then this guy. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, thank you. No, well, my question is why are they combining like Uber and Lyft, where they're two different companies?
So, it's a good question. They combine, so first of all, Uber would love it to be company specific, but Uber is still very low. So I don't think that's a solution at the moment. The reason Uber would love company specific is because Lyft is low. If Lyft has to pay drivers at the actual rate, the common belief is Lyft will bankrupt. So it's like, it's also their competition with each other, right? And so,
But they are the same team, yeah?
no, brother, they're very
Two
different.
different companies.
When they haven't,
They're owned by the
no. Uber and Lyft are totally different. Different investments.
But I have a feeling that Uber is gonna buy out Lyft, to buy out the competition.
I'm not sure because, well, first of all, there's monopolization laws at the federal government. They might not get approval for that. First, and secondly, they kind of hate each other. So that's what the business press say.
Yeah, I have a feeling they're gonna look for some loophole there.
Brother?
Yeah, I got a simple question, but it's also very, very complicated.
Go ahead.
I remember a very wise lady once said, if somebody shows you who he or she is from day one, believe him or her. Right? Just perfect. We all knew Uber and Lyft got a lot of gimmicks going.
Yeah.
Here's a fundamental question, which I don't doubt, that every single cab driver in this room, right? And every single cab driver in New York City. If you pose the question, do you want us to have our own app and just ignore Uber and Lyft? The answer is overwhelmingly yes. My question is, why don't we choose that path?
Okay, I'll be honest. I know everyone brings it up. I'm gonna give you my very honest answer, okay? If you look at it, every study shows, in order to beat Uber at this point, you would need a lot more money. Uber has become a brand name. People say, I'm gonna Uber. It's a verb. It's not just the name of the company. Because of all of you. Because of your labor. For us to go up against that is not going to happen overnight. Okay? But no, let me finish my point. Let me finish my point.
And I'm gonna use
You can reply, but let me finish my
India as an
point.
example. Let's go back prior to World War II. I'm gonna use India.
1 second, my brother, please. Listen to me, okay? I know it's important to look ahead, but if you look so ahead, like if you try to reach the sky so high you cannot touch it, you're left with nothing, okay? You have to aim for what you can immediately grab, and from there you can go higher, right? It's being practical. It's being practical. If we spend our organization, we have limited resources. And there's a lot to do. If we have to spend our time looking, finding engineers, putting an app together, looking at the marketing, trying to raise that money, I promise you, it will take up all of our time. And during that time, you're gonna lose these payrolls. You're never gonna win deactivation. Okay, we can never have fought for that 328 million. Like, I'm just being honest with you. You have to be practical. Now, once we win, okay, once we win, with each victory, it's a building, it's like a ladder. Each victory takes you to the next level. But right now, we're under an attack. Uber and Lyft are attacking you. Uber is trying to take this pay away from you. And the thing is, out of what, 100,000 drivers, maybe 10% really understand what's going on. So we have to focus on that right now. Because if we lose our focus, these people have so much money. They can do so much propaganda. It's going to be very hard for our union to keep up with it. So I really ask you guys to keep your focus on the fight in front of us right now. Brother?
The simple thing she's saying, we cannot launch our own space shuttle right now.
That means it's impossible.
So right now, it's not impossible.
It's the momentum.
Not impossible for
We cannot launch
everyone
our
at the
satellites right
moment.
now.
Just gotta reach what's possible.
Yes, sister.
But they have tried exactly what he said.
Exactly.
A better deal, a better ride. I have all the acts. I've been one of them people that wanted to go on my own, still had Uber. But, I mean, if you know, there's been companies out here trying to beat Uber.
Exactly.
That shut down at the World Trade Center. Remember that company?
Yeah.
I forgot the name of it.
Juno.
Yeah. They all shut down. Forget about it right now. Juno, exactly. All of it. We did it. Yeah, still, no, I
It's
still
not
work.
it, it's not it.
Yeah, but they
It's
do.
not that it's a good idea
Juno
and it's a good goal, but right now, it's
Juno
just not
خدتها
the
جت.
focus. So if they really want all of us to talk about it. So Brother Samasa is saying, forget the pay rules, why don't we just go straight and say our demand is 85% on every trip? I just want to respond to this, it's very important. So first of all, it is part of our demand, but let me explain our demand, right? See, if you just say go straight to 85%, right now it makes sense because the companies have been charging the passengers more money. But back in 2019, when they were, in 2017, before they started upfront pricing, they were still charging a little bit less. After they started up, they did two things after 2017. Oh, how does it two things after 2017, right? One, they started upfront pricing, right? You guys remember?
Yes.
And number two, so let me tell you guys something. This goes back to what Brother Zure was saying. Back in 2018, our union's demand was that the yellow cab meter, back what it was back then, that should be the minimum rate across the industry. That no company can charge less than that. They can charge more, but they cannot charge less. So instead of the pay rates, the meter would have been the minimum rate. And that way, if you got 85%, you got 85% of something. Because before then, they kept lowering it. So even if you got 85%, it was still a low amount because their fares were still lower. So this was our position, okay? Now, actually, IDG lobbied, okay, to fix those rates in this way. If I can show you guys the article. In New York Times, there are these articles where we were really arguing, saying these rates are still too low. And even at the TLC public hearing, you were there, Brother Swanson, in 2018?
Yeah.
We were the only people saying these rates are too low. And by separating driver pay from the passenger fare, Uber is going to start charging passengers more and taking more commission from the drivers. And we were right, because that's exactly what started to happen, right? But so we tried it at that time. And then, but we couldn't stop that tsunami. The train, it was moving too fast. We couldn't stop it then. So then we responded by saying, okay, then our job is to raise the rates. That's why we provided information about how high the expenses were. The judge even said it was because of our information that TLC had to raise the rates, because TLC said that on the record, right? And we fought for the good utilization rule. And then, since then, I mean, this was in 2019. Then, you know, when Lyft started the lockouts, by the way, our union sued Lyft. And then we were in court, but then, 2020, COVID happened, everything started to change. So, even now, we wrote those of you who are on WhatsApp, you have copies of it, and at the end of the meeting, I can give this out to anybody who would like it. But we wrote a letter to the TLC on Monday, June 24th. And it's on the flyers. One of the main demands is change the rule to say, first, fix the utilization rate. Number two, change the rule to say, on each trip, the company must pay either 85% of the fare or 100% of the rates, whichever is higher.
That's it.
That's in the campaign. That is our campaign demand.
Yes.
Right? That's the best way we're going to secure. So I think, but the last thing I wanted to just show you guys that's on the agenda is that, you see, after the oversaturation started, like after all the plates and everything, right? What started to happen, if you see, so January 2024, the industry utilization was 48.7% industry-wide. February 2024, 50.8%. March, 53.4%. Each month, think of how much money, you guys have been saying since January, it's really slow, right? People have been posting on Facebook, not making enough money, right? That's because the trips, you've had less trips. Each individual driver is seeing 10 to 15% less trips. And at the same time, the amount of time you're empty, they're not making up for it, right? That's why you're seeing your loss. What lockouts did was multiply it, but already you have the losses, right? But look at this number, total trips for Uber and Lyft. The number keeps going up. In January, it was 634,000. February, 667. March, 686. But even though the total number of trips for the companies go up, right? The utilization for the drivers has stayed low. Simple math, because there's more cars. Right? So here's why, now we know the TLC is responsible for this condition because the way they lifted the cap, like you guys know our union sued in November to the TLC, right? When you read the lawsuits, what you will find is, what we explain is, it's the way the TLC lifted the cap. TLC could have set a number, TLC knew they changed the rule. And when you went from 58% to 53%, you were gonna lose $5,000, okay? They knew that, it's their rule, number one. Number two, TLC, instead of limiting the new plates, for example, to a specific number, they could have said, okay, if X number of new cars are on the street, utilization will still stay, let's say 58%. They could have said that. And they could have put the number out in that way, but they didn't. Or TLC could have said, okay, new plates, but only to the drivers who right now are renting. And they could have limited it. So that way, drivers who are renting have an open path, and all the drivers don't have to suffer with too many new cars, including the drivers who bought the new cars. How many drivers we know who bought the new cars? A lot of them are turning plates in, they're not making enough.
Just one
right?
word, not to contradict what you say. TLC is the game that TLC is playing by giving play to whom is benefit, because we already struggling
EV
in the
market.
industry.
Yeah.
We already struggling in the industry, the taxi industry in general.
Yeah.
So TLC did not have to give any new play, period.
Right.
And that's what we need to fight and let TLC know this is an industry that, you know, feeding professional people and full-time workers, people who took this as a profession. So if they have to be regulated. So an industry with no regulation is gonna cause his worker to suffer. And somebody have to hold TLC accountable for not giving play period. Because at the time, I remember one of our meetings, I was saying that I'd rather rent a vehicle for $500 a week and make $2,000 a week than owning my own plate and can make $500. And that's where we're at right now.
Right, definitely.
TLC
So our lawsuit is still going on, by the way. Our union's lawsuit is still going on, right? But my point is that, TLC could have done it in a way that still protected all the drivers. But TLC, I believe, City Hall was not thinking, of course, not thinking about the drivers. They did not do this to support the drivers. They did it to support the EV market.
Exactly.
They're bigger players, corporate players, okay? EVs were not selling anywhere else, only in California, nowhere else. TLC gave them 100,000.
But Sister Nedem, we could negotiate. If Tesla want to sell his vehicle to the taxi industry market, so they could give us loan. The existing drivers who are on the platform of Lyft and Uber, they
No,
are
but
full-time workers.
yes, we had a proposal. Our proposal was, our proposal would have been that when the driver owner decides to buy a new car, that new car could be the EV. TLC said on average, drivers buy a new car every 7 years. So we said, okay, if every 7 years, you can still get there by 2030. So then so people who have the car now would not feel rushed to buy a new car, wouldn't feel the pressure, okay? Secondly, you could have given enough time for the charging stations to be set up, right? Third, you could have set up the financing for drivers and not just throw them into the market. But they were not thinking, this was our proposal, this was what we fought for at the TLC public hearing. But TLC did not do it that way because clearly they were in favoring the EV market. Go ahead, you had your hand up. Come on in, and there's some seats here.